Welcome to another round of Twisted Metal. We've now completed the tournament from Black, so moving forward we're going to have to resort to something a little different. Namely, the PlayStation 2 version of Twisted Metal Head-On, which is not only a solid Twisted Metal game in its own right, but comes loaded with bonus material. Most relevant to our interest is Twisted Metal Lost, starring our very own Dark World Sweet Tooth. Needles is going to get a bit self-reflective, while the text scroll here explains what we're dealing with. Lost consists of the remnants of the scrap sequel to Twisted Metal Black, which began work in 2003 under the working title Twisted Metal Harbor City. The new gimmick it planned to introduce to the series was interconnected levels that would effectively create an open-world Twisted Metal game. While that seems impossibly ambitious, what actually killed the project was the tragic deaths of 6 key members in a plane crash in 2005. Out of respect, they canceled the project, but 2 years to the day after that plane crash, a letter arrived at the offices of the developers. It begged them to release the final works of those who had died years previous, and bore the signatures of those very individuals. Though this was deemed nothing more than a tasteless prank, they were still inspired to gather what they could salvage from that production, and release it to the public for the first time in 2008 as Twisted Metal Lost. The open world gimmick is gone, but we still get to enjoy a few of the levels they completed. It also informs us that if we complete the story mode on hard difficulty, we'll get to see the letter that inspired this real-life ghost story in its entirety, and perhaps unlock some secrets contained within. I can hardly resist a siren song like that, so let's check our difficulty, make sure it's set properly. This version introduces a super easy difficulty for people who understandably do not want to deal with Twisted Metal's often ridiculous degree of difficulty. We played through Black on medium difficulty, which mostly just meant that the AI cheated a little bit less with their energy attacks. Now we're going to get to see them at full cheatiness. It was also specifically stated that they didn't write new stories for any of the characters, but they did write little epilogues to their stories from the first game. We're going to check those out now, skipping Sweet Tooth, but starting with Junkyard Dog. We'll get back to Sweet Tooth later. Turns out Billy Ray, who vowed to become a serial killer, hasn't killed another person since Black. It's actually kind of disappointing when a person doesn't become the serial killer they always wanted to be. But he'll get his chance. Up next is Shadow, who has my favorite epilogue of any character, even though her story in the first game was a bit disappointing. She now uses her voodoo dolls as sort of a death note to kill villains all around Midtown City. We know there's quite a few of those, so she has become a hero to the people. Up next is Preacher, who, despite his mass murder rampage, has been rejected by both heaven and hell. He's now a ghost who curses anyone who sees him to die of a car accident within a year. It's a bit too much of a long-term plan to help him win the tournament. Going back to John Doe, he's now attempting to bring down the Twisted Metal contest. Rumor has it, Midtown PD has a whole slew of John Does, which is pretty cartoonish. But we're going to be playing as Warthog. I'd like to check out his patient profile back in Twisted Metal Black. But it turns out he doesn't have one. Cage is the kind of psychopath who heard there was a murder contest happening and signed up willingly. In fact, his first loading screen here reveals that his problem is he's a serial killer with a conscience. He hopes that Calypso will cure him of that. The conscience part, not the killing. But on to his actual gameplay in Twisted Metal Lost, in the first level, Suburban Terror. We're going to see things are very, very different in this version of the game. Namely, a lot faster. Many, many graphical differences, character design changes. Really, that speed is coming into play very quickly. And our max armor character is destroyed almost immediately. That would never happen in Twisted Metal Black. going to have to play a little more defensively, but our attacks will destroy enemies very quickly. We don't even have to play as Grim anymore. Although playing as Grim, I will admit, is much more fun in this version of the game. We've now seen Warthog special a few times, and while it was very solid and black, it's perhaps the single worst special in all of Lost. It fires from the top of his vehicle, and will usually fire straight over even the most massive of targets. Also, Warthog's a pretty slow car. Can't really get into position to keep it on top of the faster vehicles. It also lets us see the exact values of all of our damage output. And Warthog's special averages about 3 to 11 damage for me every use. Compare that to our new weapon, the remote bomb, that does 25 damage. It's pretty bad. Even homing missiles do 7. Really wrecks Warthog's viability as a character, especially because they've greatly improved almost all the other specials in the game. They even did me the favor of completely removing Axel's really stupid alternate special. They did let Shadow keep her alt special for whatever reason. Enough lamenting though. Despite my impediment, I have taken out 2 of the 6 competitors, which is pretty generous, having only 6 enemies. Now that we're 33% closer to winning, you can take a break and do a little exploring. There may not be any secrets or open world elements here, but there's still fully developed levels that we get to check out. Quite a lot to see, in fact. Up here on top of Happy Vito's Pizzeria, we can get a good look at the fake movies. Really all you need to see is Sphincter Man to know that Twisted Metal Lost was going for a very different tone to Twisted Metal Black. Perhaps Welcome, Twisted Metal Black did get very, very bleak. A little bleak for some people's tastes. It might be a little too far in the opposite direction for me. This is still a fun level though. One of the better suburbs levels you'll find in a Twisted Metal game, and there's quite a few. This is the only one I know of where we get to climb on top of a giant pizza at least. I've heard the developers say that they enjoy designing suburban levels because it gives a sense of familiarity to the player. Most of their players having driven through suburban areas before in their actual lives. Keeps things grounded despite all the craziness and chaos. Now, a change to the freeze in this game is that, as far as I know, there's no way to break out of it. I've never been able to, at least. You just gotta keep getting blasted or wait for it to wear off, which is really, really annoying. Speaking of really, really annoying, they've added 2 different sound effects to indicate that our health is low. They will play continuously as long as our health stays in the red. As though the threat of imminent death were not incentive enough to get us to recover our health. Fortunately, I know of this extremely well-hidden recharge station. We only get 1 use of that recharge station, so we won't have to go back to it anytime soon. On that green persistent fog there, that's the trail left behind by Spectre's special now. It's actually a pretty neat effect. A lot more cartoonish than the way it was in Black, though. The Ricochet is a drastically changed weapon. It's now very, very deadly, but much harder to use. It moves a lot more slowly, and it expires much more quickly. You mostly want to use it when you're point blank. You want to deal a lot of damage real quick. I also have to mention that it looks real dumb. It's like a beach ball sort of thing, with a fuse coming out of it. Just missed with a power missile. That aptly demonstrates how drastically changed the physics are in Twisted Metal Lost. We can now fling the heaviest vehicle in the game right over a wall.
Health is low.
It's very arcadey. It's a lot of fun, I will admit that. Now I gotta make a beeline for the health pickup. It's up here somewhere. But not through there. I don't know why they made that roof destructible, but it does look pretty cool. We can only get up there by jumping, but jumping no longer takes up any of our energy bar. So that's nice, we get to jump anywhere we want to. Gonna make another attempt at climbing the pizzas. Ah, still can't make it onto that second pizza. Not really meant to, there's no secrets up there. It's just a personal challenge. The faster vehicles have a much easier time of doing that. Now, in stark contrast to my usual use of Warthog special there, I did 23 damage with one use. Quite the rarity, though. You now see that ramming outdamages most of our attacks. For larger vehicles, it's a very effective way to kill enemies. They've also gone and made our machine guns more effective, so those will be more useful than they ever have been. But they've added a drawback. They now overheat faster and for a longer period of time. So they'll be out of order much more often than we ever saw in the main game. Just wanted to explore this last back road of the suburbs before I finish off the final two enemies. Seems like back here is where they were going to connect the freeways that led to the rest of the levels in the open world. I believe that fence that we just saw would have led to one of them. Perhaps that one on the left would have done so as well. Darkside got away from me, so I decided to wreck up the jungle gym. She's probably on the lookout for a health pickup, which is a very obnoxious new AI routine that they've added on hard difficulty for this game. If there's a health pickup out there, the enemy will break from combat and try to go grab it from you. At least to drastically increase longevity. She did do me the favor of putting me out of my misery, ending the low health sound effects. She's at low enough health herself that I should be able to finish her off. She's not going towards any of the health pickup locations, which means they haven't respawned yet. So she is dead meat. Once I can figure out how to get down to her. Yeah, she's stuck in there. And she destroyed herself by ramming into me. So that's our first level of Twisted Metal Lost out of the way. It's a bit simple, and I think it suffers from the lack of secrets that probably would have made it into the final game, but nonetheless a very solid and fun introduction to the new mechanics of Lost. And after all that killing, I'm sure Cage is full of remorse. Let's see if Calypso can do anything to ease his suffering.
I had won the contest. I went to Calypso and demanded my prize. I wanted him to remove the part of my brain that made me so sad whenever I took a human life. I wanted to become the best killer there ever was. Calypso went to work right away, and as a bonus, he didn't just operate on my head. He gave me a new pair of hands. They would become my trademark. When I killed, everyone would know it was me. Midtown was scared of that clown freak. I'll show them something they'll never forget.
Another problem solved with lobotomy. We saw back in Bloody Mary's story that Calypso's methods of brain surgery are perhaps not 100% effective, but Cage seems to be a satisfied customer. And he doesn't even seem to mind the added challenge of driving with sword hands. As we'll see in his epilogue, though, he didn't get to use those hands for very long. His attempt to set a new murder record aroused the ire of Sweet Tooth, who then reduced him to nothing more than a head and torso somehow kept alive on life support, Crank 2 style. So that's one happy ending soured by the whims of Sweet Tooth. We'll see if our next competitor fares any better.